I am back today with some more Sydney Film Festival coverage. I just covered Cottontail. You can go check out their review, link above me. And now, time to move on to the second film that I saw at the festival. Directly after that film, Superman, the Christopher Reeve story. A really interesting documentary about the life of the one and only Superman from the 1970s and 80s, Christopher Reeve. So, let's get into it. So, the title of this says it all. Superman, the Christopher Reeve story is a pretty interesting account about some key moments in the life of Christopher Reeve. Beginning around the time just before he got the role of Superman, how that role completely changed his life and changed the way that his career trajectory was at the time as an actor. And we move all the way through his life, detailing the tragic accident that he had where he became paralyzed from the neck down and the struggles that he had and the way that his family would lift him up and support him through these incredibly tough times and how he was able to move through life with these struggles. On a technical note, I do think this documentary is really well put together. It obviously doesn't have the footage for every single moment. Some of the things that this documentary go into are really intimate and really personal. And it's so fearless in its approach. It's willing to tell us everything from the ugly parts in his life to the more glorious moments and the highlights. And overall, it just felt like an incredibly vulnerable and personal documentary that it makes you feel a lot more closer to Christopher Reeve, the man, and understanding who he really was. And I just think that the way that this was put together was really phenomenal. From the editing, the way that they utilized archival footage with shots from movies that he's in to kind of paint a picture of some of the situations that he's in these more intimate moments. Really appreciated them going for that, as well as utilizing visual effects, particularly around when he's dealing with this injury. It gives you this visualization of this Superman figure floating through space, and when they're talking about the parts of his body that were affected, kryptonite shows up on his body in these visual effects moments. And I think that was a really interesting choice. It doesn't work all the time, but I do think it is a brilliant choice for this documentary. But let's get into the actual accounts and details that are talked about in this documentary. I won't go through everything because I want you to experience it for yourself. But this was an incredibly emotional documentary that, once again, like Cottontail, moved me to tears. This thing was so emotional in its approach because it's so vulnerable. It gives you these really tough details in not just Christopher Reeve's life, but his family's life. It's not just about him. And I really loved the way that this was a love letter to his family and the support system that he had around him. You see all of these different facets of his life, starting with his career, where he was this up-and-coming actor in Juilliard. He was in theater, and when he got the role of Superman, the criticism that he took from people that worked in theater, saying that he sold out and all of these things, and dealing with the repercussions of playing a superhero. Even back then, the criticism was harsh. And obviously, Superman became this massive success, big commercial hit. And it shows how that affected him, both the positive and negative ways that it did. It showed him distancing from his first wife. It showed him being wrapped up in the success. And it also showed the highlights of his life in those moments where he is in this incredibly fulfilling spot, but he does want to move on from just being Superman and actually flex his muscles as an actor. It makes a really good point of showing that outside of Superman, he's actually playing these very thespian theatrical roles where he's really pushing his limits as an actor. It did feel kind of similar to Val, which only came out a couple of years ago, where you see an actor that wants to try all these different things and experiment with his craft, but sometimes gets funneled into just being the one thing because it was a big hit. I loved all those aspects of this documentary, but when this really hits is when we start going into the accident where he became paralyzed from the neck down. It illustrates the incredible struggles he had to the point where he didn't want to live anymore after this happened. It shows that he's a very active person and loves being outside and doing all of these activities, and now he can't do that. Was incredibly heartbreaking to him and his family. And there's certain moments between him and his wife that helped push him through and fight for disabled people all over the world and become this really inspirational figure. It shows the impact of a character like Superman and the actor behind it being in such a vulnerable state and how he can still inspire so many people. I really, really loved the way that this weaved together all of that by showcasing us these vulnerable moments. There's also footage of him with one of his best friends at the time, Robin Williams, and those moments really got to me because, as we know, both these people suffered really tragic fates, and to show how these two really propped each other up and the way that Robin Williams was such a supportive person in Christopher Reeve's life. There is a really nice story that happens within the film about where Robin Williams visited Christopher Reeve in the hospital pretty close after the accident happened and just put a smile on his face. And stories like that just showcase how much of a beacon of joy and wonder that Robin Williams was, that even though he was fighting a lot of demons, he was able to help so many people, including those close to him, to help them get through the real dark days in their life. And I just really, really love that. And it strikes a chord with me. Those moments were really hitting me emotionally. I just really loved the way that this documentary showcased that. The love story between Christopher and Dana, showcasing how she was his rock through all of this, supported him through all of this, and the way that they really inspired and helped one another as well as support their family was very interesting. You see moments where sometimes Christopher Reeve wasn't as present as what he maybe should have been from the account of some of his kids. But then you do see these other moments where he is. It's just really, really honest. And that's what I'm saying here. It's not just this big glory piece on Christopher Reeve. It's willing to show the ugly parts. It's willing to show the parts where he wasn't all that, where he was lost and confused and didn't know what to do at times, when he was suffering through a lot of criticism for some of the marketing things that he was doing when he was in a wheelchair, and the amount of fighting he did for disabled people to get more and more funding. He was so supportive of stem cell research and all of these things. And right up until the day he died, he was there supporting it all. And it's just, once again, so inspiring and so fascinating. I don't want to go really into the parts that really made me tear up and made so many other people tear up in the theater, because I'll keep that for your own viewing experience. But they really get to you because they are so intimate and personal. They're moments in someone's life that are quite ugly, and just parts that we're not really wanting to showcase to the world. And I just really, really appreciate this for being so honest and vulnerable, because that takes a lot of courage. The fact that the family were open to sharing these stories and experiences in such an honest fashion makes for an incredibly moving documentary that I just think was a really, really great account of the story of Christopher Reeve. It's an excellent tribute, and I think whenever this does come out worldwide, you need to check this out, especially if you love those Superman movies and are a fan of Christopher Reeve. I think that this is one that you should not miss, because this is just a really, really great account of just everything that he went through. It's so honest It's so well put together and edited. I do wholeheartedly think that this deserves an Academy Award nomination in the documentary category because it's just that good. I also really like the score that played in this documentary. It does feel like a riff on the Man of Steel Superman score a little bit in some moments, but then it goes off into this different kind of melody, and I just really liked it. It just fit this documentary perfectly. It felt like this big epic thing that really feels like a Superman property, but then it just changes in this more intimate fashion that fits the real tone of this documentary. So I just think it's so well put together. I feel like I'm rambling a little bit now, so I'm going to wrap it up. As a score, I think Superman the Christopher Reeve story is a 4.5 out of 5. It was a really great film, and seeing this after Cottontail was really interesting. Both these films have this strange dichotomy. It's not intentional by any means, but there's certain themes in both that movie and this documentary that kind of connect in a weird way. It made for an excellent double feature, so great planning from the Sydney Film Festival team for putting these two movies together, because it just really connected in just these bizarre ways, even though they're completely separate movies. Just bizarre. Anyway, I highly recommend this documentary. Go check it out when you get the chance to see it. And those are my thoughts towards Superman the Christopher Reeve story. If you've seen the documentary, let me know what you think about it in the comments below. I'd love to have a conversation with you about this documentary. Consider hitting that join button and becoming a member. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.